Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Supergirl, as well as the latest episode of The Walking Dead. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when to start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Supergirl, you can skip to what I say about this week's episode of The Walking Dead. But the first thing I want to talk about is this week's episode of Supergirl. We finally get our introduction to this continuity's Lex Luthor, who is played by John Cryer. I guess I shouldn't be too surprised because we've gotten our Superman and obviously our Lois Lane. Obviously Elseworld introduced us to our Lois Lane, but it was just so interesting because I saw John Cryer come up before, just kind of going a little bit of tangent. I was thinking that was going to be like a movie thing. It wasn't until like recently that I saw that was going to be a TV show thing. I was like, oh, I wish I kind of didn't know that ahead of time, but still, wow. And our introduction to him is like 4 years ago. He literally made a red sun that was basically going to destroy the earth, but he didn't care as long as it meant killing Superman, showing how obsessed he was, even giving his sister handcuffed to a chair, front row seats to it. It's like, jeez, are you not like crazy? Even to the point he kills some people in a helicopter. It's like, now what was I saying again? It's like, dude. Now that ends up playing a big role in this episode because it turns out, lo and behold, that's who Lena's been working with this entire time. He's actually the one that like pulls strings to get her working at the DEO, which apparently Haley doesn't know that. He's like, no one's going to know that. I'm like, wow. And for her, that's the main reason why she pushed Jimmy away, because Jimmy wasn't willing to kind of see the gray side of things. It's because now she realized, like, when he got to make that stance at that point in time, it was her realization that, like, if Jimmy found out I was working with Lex, literally the arch nemesis to his best friend, of course he, it would complicate our relationship. So she'd rather have things end with a broken heart rather than him being upset, and just things would be 10 times worse. I think things are going to be 10 times worse on top of all of this now, but nevertheless. And it is interesting, like the kind of partnership that they have, the twisted relationship that they have, and stuff, for him being like, oh yeah, like, that's how we always work, you come up with an idea, I shoot it down, you get motivated to try and impress me, because that's all you ever done. But he tries to be so sentimental and everything. I'm like, because I love him being like, oh, it's interesting, the fact that you're coming to me to save Jimmy, the best friend of my arch nemesis, It's like, yeah, you broke up with him, good riddance and stuff like that. And it's so interesting too, because it's like, oh, he's dying from cancer right now because he tried to use kryptonite to stop Superman, and he used it on himself and stuff like that. And she's like, it's ironic because now you need black kryptonite to save your life. And she's like, the irony is delicious, which is interesting too, because even he praises her, because it's like, you created kryptonite, something I could not do, so. And you even see that as the episode progresses, I'm like, man, it's kind of twisted that Lena's kind of like, you can tell her being worried about her brother. Because I guess at the end of the day, no matter how much of a psychopath he is, the fact that she's worried about him, it's like, yeah, he's pulling at her heartstrings. But I think it's also because there is a part of her that cares about him, because it's like, hey, he is my brother through and through. Like, that familial bond, it's hard to break, even if your brother is this legitimate supervillain, So it's such an interesting dynamic the two of them have. And for it to all be what it is, I mean, that I didn't see so much. Like, I'm not too surprised about the fact is that he got cured and everything, and it was all a trap. I did not see the traps within the traps. Like, at first when he was like, oh yeah, like, she figured it out, it's like, when she figured it out, I was like, oh, he was the one that shot Jimmy. But then she was like, oh, you're the one that shut down the power at the hospital, so I had no choice but to test it on Jimmy. And it's like, yeah, well, you're missing a thing. I'm also the one that had Jimmy shot. It's like, Jesus, dude, from the beginning you've been part of your brother's plan. Like, I mean, that shows you just how maniacal Lex is, coming in seeming so broken and frail, and he's letting himself get beat up by the guards. I knew something was up there, because he's like, oh no, he doesn't know what he's doing, blah blah blah. I'm like, you're being a little too okay with everything, because you enjoy being powerful. There's no way you're just going to sit down and take being weak. But it's like, that was all to make Lena more sympathetic, because she's like, hey, I'll have you arrested for the blah 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 blah. I was like, I said, she was getting sympathetic towards her brother. And then it turns out, Mercy's brother is still alive, which I'm assuming that means she's still alive. And it turns out Eve has been a bad guy the entire time. It's like, what the fuck? That means ever since she's popped up, she's been evil. It's like, jeez, dude, that's crazy. Especially considering the fact is, I guess that's one of the reasons why she was being like, oh no, we're the good guys, to Jimmy, trying to make him go like, I bet you don't think she's the one that shot Jimmy. Jesus, she might have been the one that ended up shooting Jimmy. Maybe, I don't know. But the fact is that she was telling Jimmy, I was like, oh no, this Black Book stuff, it's all on the up and up. Oh, Lena, like I was thinking like she turned on Lena being like, oh, Lena's doing bad stuff, because it's like, oh, you're trusting your brother. She's like leaving your brother with all your research and stuff like that. She played her role well. I did not see that coming. That is crazy. I guess she's kind of like the Mercy in this situation. I get, once again, it's just interesting considering the fact this Mercy was there, but I guess, she's going now if she's not. Which is interesting how this is going to all end up tying together, because obviously Lex is free, he's cured and everything, and I'm sure Lillian's going to come back into the fold just so the Luthor family can be reunited and everything. It's like everything's going to blow up in Lena's face, because not only did her brother get escape, he got cured. He's been the one you've been working with the entire time. To be fair, you were working with Eve, who was subsequently working with your brother for a long ass time. Like that's a long ass con waiting for the right moment and stuff like that. I mean, he's been dying for a while, but he's found out about. Because I was wondering when he brought up the whole Harrenhal situation, I'm like, how the hell do you know about it? Is it just your resources? It's like, no, she came to you because you're like the other smartest person she knows when it comes to this situation. And it's so sad because he told that story of like, oh yeah, like I wanted to hate your mom, but she was so kind to me. Like mom sent me away when it was like, oh, my dog was dying for the surgery and stuff like that. I couldn't be there for him, which is so interesting because it shows you like it wasn't Lex that became the way he did. It was more so, it was kind of a nurture rather than a nature moment, because his mom kind of turned him into who he is. But to be fair, probably that isn't just on her, that's probably on him too. I mean, Lillian's crossed some lines, but I don't think she's going to the extent of creating like a red sun that's destroying the planet and an attempt to kill one person. I mean, it was more so the situation of just to be able to prove that a god could die. It's like, and everyone will thank me for it, which I obviously, with the current circumstances the Earth is in right now, Lex is going to flourish. We might even see him kind of join up with Agent Liberty and all that. I guess the person whose strings he might be pulling might be the president. I don't know. I mean, we see him and Ben Lockwood being buddy, so it makes you go, would it be that bit of a stretch? I mean, yes, he's done some terrible things, but he's also the one that stood up and like, oh, he's the one that recognizes the evil that is alien. So I think a lot more people might turn to Lex, no matter how much of a terrible human being he is and stuff like that. So we'll ultimately kind of have to wait and see where things go in that regard. But I'm so curious to see how everyone, including Jimmy, is going to feel when the time comes for this whole, Lena situation about her brother being free and all that. I do like that it ends on like Supergirl Kara and, Lex meeting face to face. It's like, oh, it's like, dude. He hid the mansion too. I guess that was also to make sure that no one finds Lena. I guess Eve's meant to be there just to kind of keep her in line and stuff like that. Not kill her, but just keep her in line and keep her there from letting anyone really know what's up potentially. What's also interesting in this episode too is we got introduced to Jimmy's sister. Never knew he had a sister. In Smallville, he had a brother. He might have more siblings that I'm not aware of. I don't remember in Smallville if they ever brought up him having a sister at all, because I know in Smallville he had a little brother. I don't know. Either way, maybe he has both. Once again, moving on. His sister shows up because, Jimmy might end up being paralyzed from this. And it causes a complicated situation because obviously John and Kara are off trying to track down Manchester because all of this is they think that he's the one behind this because he's orchestrated so much other stuff. He's desecrating, John's father's burial ground. And, all while this is happening, Alex has got to be there trying to make choices for Jimmy. But it's like, I'm not family. But then, like, Kelly shows up and she gives them, like, room. That's like, hey, these people are family. So, obviously, they can have access to Jimmy, too. But it's like, obviously, like, Kelly's like, oh, let him go through the surgery. But she's like, no, Lena can use, she can work on this. But it's like, for her, it's like, Kelly's like, my brother's been in terrible situations before because of that family. For one, I don't know Lena. I just know their family has caused my brother a lot of pain. I was like, I guess it makes sense because it's like, you are Superman's best friend. Even, Lex referred to him as that. So it must mean that Jimmy kind of got caught up in a lot of stuff in like, his vendetta against Superman, So, side note too, I'm curious about this continuity because it was brought up before that like Clark and Lex were close, kind of going into that Smallville continuity, but we don't know if it doesn't seem that he knows that Clark is Superman. It's probably just a situation that they were friends and then like at, eventually when it went past that, eventually when he became Superman, him and Lex were nemesis at that regard. So I guess that's kind of how that gets chalked up in this. And like I said, that was like season 1 continuity they were talking about that, so that could be something that's retconned in this. We'll ultimately have to wait and see how things kind of shake out to kind of fully see what's, continuous in this continuity. So, but obviously that would kind of make you go, yeah, I mean, for one, it's like, it's a Luthor, like, no matter what Lena's done, she will always have that stench of, like, the whole Luthor situation. It's like, once again, your brother is mad supervillain scientist, so it's like, yeah, that's always, but she's always done her best to shake it, and that's always been something I've always thought, like, I thought in the end, because that's what kind of shocks me, that they would introduce Lex at all. I mean, I guess it makes sense, but at the same time, it's like, I was so sure that Lena would have just naturally gone down that route herself. Instead, we just have, like, I guess that's kind of further proving, like, her distancing herself from her family. I mean, he did kind of say something I think is still true. The fact is that the rest of the family will always reside in darkness, but your mom was a good person, so you will always reside in light because you were born out of love. So I think that is kind of true, that Lena probably will never go down. I will always kind of felt like that might just be her unfortunate destiny, but it seems like that's not the case. It seems like, hey, when it's all said and done, she might stay on the right side of things. She always tries her best, because the whole point was, like, trying to make sure that, because I was wondering if Jimmy's going to get powers or something. It's like, no, because she separated her, because, like, the powers, I even love him being like, she's like, the other abilities, and he's like, superpowers. He's like, it sounds less silly the more times you say it. She's like, fine, superpowers. But basically the superpowers are what was killing people, so she had to separate it and make it so that the cure is there. Like, the abilities have to be kind of, like, spaced out, essentially. So we'll see. Like, I doubt there was any powers there. I guess it's something even Lex isn't really too worried about, at least for right now. But at very least, he's cured, and I guess that's all that matters. His genius will be what gets him through this, which is interesting. Let's not forget, Clark and Lois are on their honeymoon right now. Well, not honeymoon. Their little getaway, obviously off-world, so that's going to be interesting when the news comes to him, like, yo, Lex is back. I mean, I'm sure Kara's going to try and handle that on her own, but nevertheless. But some other interesting things that came about was the whole conversation between Nia and Brainy, because they both blamed themselves. For her, it's like, I didn't see this happening with my dreams. What's the point of having these powers if I can't protect the people I love? But for Brainy, it's like, I should have figured this was going to happen. I should have deduced it. The fact is, Manchester could have easily done this if he had my Legion ring. He could just swoop in. It's like, that's all my fault. And later on, I love him kind of breaking down, because he's like, it's not just this. Supergirl almost died, and Mon-El used to kind of won't let it slide about the fact is, because it's like, yeah, most of his family is evil. He's literally the only good one, at least that we're really aware of. It's kind of neat, just kind of dropping that on Nia, and Nia and him kiss, and it was like the electricity. I was thinking, like, oh, was that supposed to be them? It's like, no, that was the dam. Well, we now know that was Lex. But I love him being like, we can't be together, I think that's more so from the fact is he knows that eventually he's going to have to go back to his own time. And it's like him impeding with something like that in the past, like dating someone. It's like Nia's got her own future. So it's like for me to be there to kind of impede. And I think she's kind of like, whatever you say, Wildcat. So I think, she's going to be like, we'll see what ends up happening about that, because obviously it seemed like there was a lot of flirtation and there was going to be something there, but when something's about to happen, Brady's like, no, because I think he doesn't want to be the one that ends up screwing up time and changing the future too drastically, so I'm sure that's what's keeping him pushed back. What was also interesting about this was, like, Alex was kind of pissed at Kara, because it's like, when everything's kind of falling apart, I need you by my side during all of this, and you're not here. Like, literally, Jimmy's your best friend. You're off doing something, and obviously you're lying to me because you say you're going to Catco, but apparently you haven't been all day. It's like, wait, you're with John. What are you going to do? Like, when trouble comes, like him hunting Manchester, and she's like, yeah, go. I hope, your investigation goes well. Because she was a little snippy, because it's like, for her, it's almost like you're putting that before, Jimmy. But later on, Kara admits it's like she couldn't just stand by and do nothing. Like, doing nothing hurt more so than anything. And that's what, Alex was trying to do something the entire episode, too. So they both can understand, because they both care about Jimmy, and they just needed something to do, because just sitting there just wasn't doing anything, And John has his own issues, because Manchester was able to reverse what John was doing. John was getting in his head. He could get inside John's head, showing him stuff, showing him like Kara and Alex being dead and being like, this is what happened because you chose the path of peace. And it's hard for him, you know? And, you know, when the time came down to it, you know, Manchester is taunting him with his family and stuff like that, seeing them being attacked by the White Martians, and John snapped and ended up killing him with the staff, and he's like, it's beautiful, and drops the Legion ring. And he won't give it back to Brainy yet because it's like he'd have to explain how he got it, and he doesn't know what he's doing because, like, he crossed that path. He was trying to follow a path of peace, and he ended up going down that route. He ended up killing Manchester, no matter what the cause. Like, even if he was saving lives doing it, the fact of the matter is he still took someone's life, and it's like, I don't know what kind of man I am now. I am not a man of peace. That's what I know now, you know. And it's sad because I talked about it before. I think John tried to overcorrect. I think he tried to swing a complete 180 on the other spectrum of trying to walk the path of a man of peace. But I think he has to walk. I mean, to be fair, it's like you can make the argument like the Kryptonians, you know. Kara and Superman have gone down that road. They've never directly ended up killing anyone, you know. That's kind of not their thing, you know. So I think that's what the argument could be made of, like, they can, well, even then, it's like the walking down the path of peace isn't just about not killing someone, it's about not fighting, using your fists. They do. So, but for him, it's like, I think he has to find that middle ground, and I think that's going to be it. But walking the path of not a manhunter and not a peace person, but kind of a combination of the two, neither while being both, you know. He has to find his own way, essentially, when it's all said and done. And actually dead. The fact that he dropped the Legion ring makes me think so, but it's like, I mean, he's faked his death before, so there's no telling. I mean, this might have actually been the end, but, you know, for him, it's like Manchester was his test, and I'm sure in his mind it's like, I failed, you know. So, and I'm sure that's going to haunt him, you know. So we'll ultimately have to wait and see where things kind of go in that regard, but I'm so interested to see where all of this takes us going forward. I wonder, will we get to see Jimmy's sister around more? Like I said, will there also be any side effects from Jimmy getting the cure? Obviously, Lex is out and about. Once again, like, we're progressing further into the season, and that other Kara thing has not necessarily played out. Like, it's been such a huge background thing. The last thing we saw, it seemed like she might have died, and some, you know, of that Harrenhal kind of like escaped and kind of caused problems for a little bit, but we haven't seen like the full drastic measure that. We haven't cut back to that. Like I said, I'm so surprised because I was so certain the second half of the season would have something to do with that. It's like a little bit, but that thing has been like a very behind the scenes type of thing. That might be something that ultimately pays off in the end. That might be like a big climax to this, is that maybe Lex ends up finding out about that whole situation, and that becomes a whole thing. I mean, he could like use fake Kara, the Red Daughter, to cause mayhem, and when she's causing mayhem, kind of turn the entire world, which the world's already kind of super against aliens and stuff like that, make it all seem like it's Kara doing it, and she ends up taking the fall for it. So I don't know. Like I said, that's just kind of a running thought right now. We'll see whether it really plays out like that, but it's definitely going to be interesting to see what goes down going forward, especially because, like, what's the DEO going to say with, like, Lena trying to make this, you know, will they work with her continuing forward now that this kind of happened? They'll probably try and blame Lena for it, you know, her brother escaping. Like I said, we'll just have to wait and see. And now moving on to this week's episode of The Walking Dead. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. It's kind of interesting, and I like how they did this episode, structured the way they did. We finally kind of got a little bit of answers about why Alexandria ended up the way that it did, while this whole situation with Daryl, Connie, Lydia, and Henry is happening. Because obviously, you know, because even, you know, Aaron is like, yo, should we really let them in because they're with Lydia? It's like, I don't trust her, but it's like, Michonne's like, but I trust Daryl, you know. So it's like, obviously we know with Aaron probably would have been a lot more open before. Maybe, I don't know, because the fact is, even that hesitation was there, even though it's like, the fact is she's with Daryl, sure, that should speak volumes, but that wasn't enough. It had to come from Michonne's mouth to be like, we should trust Daryl. But at the same time, we learn why they don't really trust as many people. They met a group alone, we can honestly say it was like 6 years ago, because this was when she was Michonne was still pregnant with RJ. And the fact is, like, the leader was Jocelyn. Interestingly enough, it's the actress who played Tara in True Blood, so that was pretty dope. But the fact is, what ended up being the case, it's like, it's sad because it's like, oh, she takes care of all these kids and talks about how wonderful they are and what they're capable of and everything. And lo and behold, what ends up being the case, Jocelyn ends up taking the other kids. I guess because for her, it's like, the fact is, something must have happened to her, like, when she was younger and during all of this, because for her, it's like, the fact of the matter is, she didn't want kids to grow up in a situation weak, which is kind of interesting, because that seems like that's a mentality that you could make the argument Negan kind of had. Obviously, he didn't have a whole bunch of kids, but, you know, he respected Carl for not being, like, a weak kid and all this, and so that seemed like what she was trying to build up of, like, raise these kids to do incredible things, so, you know, get them prepared for this world. And it's sad because for Michonne, it's like, she looked at Jocelyn as a friend who was there for her all through, you know, heartbreak and her mom passing away. And she thought, like, oh, after these 15 years, maybe she could be that again. But it's so interesting because Michonne made such a point to be like, people don't change, which is so interesting. She made that point, even though she saw someone she cared about change. And, you know, Daryl's like, the fact is, there are some people who are so evil, they just are very good at putting a mask on, hiding it, and it's such a shame. Like, because in her own twisted logic, you can tell Jocelyn thought like she was doing the right thing, because it's like, oh, I'm taking these kids off your hand, I'm going to raise them, because it's like, you're coddling them, because like, obviously that was them still trying to build out Alexandria. They were still hopeful, trying to keep up with what Carl wanted, what, you know, Rick wanted, like keeping up with all of that, you know, because this was also a vulnerable time for Michonne anyway, because she, you know, she ends up talking about it later on, but she was lost. Like, she had promised she would never have to bury another child after Carl, and then on top of that, losing Rick, and during this situation, potentially losing Judith. It was too much. And the fact that she was forced to, I was like wondering, I was like, are they going to actually make her do it? And it's like, yes. I mean, we don't know if Daryl had to or not, because he ended up tying up one of the kids. So it's like probably some of them ended up getting away, but Michonne ended up taking down quite a few, if not most of them. Like, we saw at least one of them that definitely got away, Winnie. So it's like, that might be something that we see kind of circle back around. But now we kind of understand where that scar on her back came from. It was her being branded, marked for death, essentially, amongst their group. And it's just, it's sad because, you know, it had to be hard for Michonne, because this is someone she once considered a friend. Plus, it's all these are kids that are in this situation. She didn't want to do it, but for her, it's like her child was in danger. And for her, that created the mentality of, we can't be worried about anyone else, because by being worried about someone else's situation, we're putting our own people, our own children. Because, like, you know, for her, it's like, Judith is my responsibility. She's my daughter. With Carl going, with Rick going, the fact of the matter is, I have to be the one protecting. Because you know what makes it even worse? What makes it worse is that Jocelyn was like, hey, you got to go out there and find your man, because if you don't, you'll always be wondering, and it's always, you know, and at the very least, you need to know. It's like, she's egging her up, building her up like that, just to stab her in the back like that. It's like, I mean, for her, she's like, I didn't expect it to be you, but it's just kind of, she was like, it's fate. And it's just like, dude, not only did they do that, they also stole a whole bunch of supplies and food, because that's the whole point, to make it seem like, oh, there's some, I mean, I get it, that's how they draw other groups in, make it seem like, oh, and then like, oh, yeah. I mean, to be fair, it kind of makes sense too, because I mean, I guess that could speak volumes in itself too, because you'd be like, well, Jocelyn's using those kids. Like, obviously she's training them, but also using kids as a way to kind of get people to lower their guard. So it works in that regard too. But it's sad that things went down to that level. And even Michonne was worried, because Judith came out, almost had this look on her face like, who are you? But then she's like, mommy, and ran up to her. But it's like, dude, that's rough. Because she had talked about, like, she had done a lot of stuff she wasn't proud of, and it seems like that's the case. I'm chalking this up as, like, because obviously this isn't a look at everything that went down in those 6 years, but what I chalk it up to is, basically when shit kind of went down with the other communities, Alexandria was like, nah, I'm sorry, you're on your own. So probably when people got sick, when people were really hurt, it's kind of, we picked up pieces over the year, like, you know, over these episodes, to be like, that's what it was. Like, because it made it seem like maybe there was bad blood, like some stuff, like, it almost seemed like there was a war between the groups or something like that. It's like, no, when stuff went down, when things start falling apart for different groups, Alexandria wouldn't lift a hand, because I was like, no, I'm sorry about you guys, but we're worried about our people. We can't be worried about yours too. And it's kind of interesting because, you know, Judith takes after Michonne a lot. She's kind of very stubborn. And for her, it's like, not even just stubborn, but she's very courageous, and she's willing to, fight for what she believes in. And for her, it's like, we need to help out Daryl and the others, because for her, she hasn't seen Daryl in a while. And it's like, it's like you brought Lydia because you're trying to help. It's like, that's kind of what my dad would do. And for her, she's like, because she heard about the story about, like, hey, when the time came, like, all the communities came together to deal with the saviors. It's like, we can do that again with this new group. But, Daryl was like, but you haven't heard all the stories. And that was the thing. Michonne hadn't told her everything. And apparently she's been talking to Negan. That's what part of their conversations have been about. And Michonne even brings it up. She's like, oh, have you told her about Glenn and Abraham? It's like, I thought not. But I was like, oh, I guess she got you there. It's like, nope. He's like, she's asked me. She's got questions. So I told her the truth. The fact of the matter is, that is your little girl, yes. So that means she's just like you. When stuff's going down, she's not going to just sit back. She's going to go out and get shit done. That's just, because she takes after Michonne like that, And it's kind of interesting, and it's kind of crazy that the one person that would tell her the truth is Negan. Negan's always kind of been upfront, like, no matter, you don't agree with the way he goes about things and who he is and all that, but he's always kind of been upfront. And that's the thing, because Michonne didn't want to tell Judith the truth, because it's like, by telling you the truth, like, she was scared, because it's like such a terrible moment that kind of put everything in perspective. But it turns out Judith actually remembers it all. Like, the fact of the matter is, she's like, you were covered in blood, so I almost didn't recognize you for a second, but then I realized it was you. And the reason why I never brought it up is because I knew how much it hurt you. But it's like, we always fought for the people we love. So, Daryl, Maggie, Carol, do we not love them? It's like, of course we do. So why does it feel like we don't? Because it's like, we close all our hearts. Like, we're supposed to fight for the people that are important to us. She's like, the fact of the matter is, you took me in like I'm your daughter, and I love you. You love me, and I love you. And I'm like, damn it, dude. I don't know. That's such a heartwarming moment, I think. And I thought that was so, like I said, it was just so neatly done. And it kind of puts everything into perspective. That would kind of make you like that, like, your child in danger. Like, of course that would set that off in your head to be like, we got to close our ranks and stuff like that, especially because the person who did that was someone you once considered a good friend. So of course it's going to make you close your hearts off the people, like, because in her mind, it's just, I'm sure in Michonne's mind, it's like, we still care about these people, we just can't lend them a hand. It's like, they're still friends, but obviously I'm sure over the years, when things start getting worse and worse, that started deteriorating, like, the relationships between the different groups. And that's why things kind of fell apart, because if they're not all in this together, like, those ties start, then other people start being like, well, we got to keep to ourselves. We got to keep to ourselves too. So it just became like that, sadly, when they stopped helping each other. At the very least, it started with Alexandria. And I'm sure, because a group we still have yet to check up on is Oceanside. It's actually interesting because even Michonne was kind of trying to tell Lydia, it's like, I could tell you care about Henry. I do too. In situations like this, sometimes it's best just to leave, because realizing that all the trouble's kind of following you and you kind of be saving them is something to think about. Like, to be fair, Lydia literally tried that. It didn't work because Henry tracked her down anyway. So it's like, Henry cares about her. He's not going to back away, So even if she tried to do that again, which, to be fair, who's to say she still won't change her mind? Hopefully we get a moment in the next episode where Michonne talks to her and says, I'm sorry, I kind of take it back, So it's going to be interesting. Because I even love Connie being like, oh yeah, if, this isn't what I had planned, but I'd do it all over again. Granted, I'd be in different shoes to do it, So I guess for, the reason why she was out there, she wanted to try and help whatever way she could. So she was probably trying to track down Daryl. Obviously, she probably is not very, very good at tracking people yet, but at the very least, that's why she was dealing with all those walkers and stuff like that. So that was kind of interesting to see, like, and finally understand, like, what put them in that situation. But, they decided to kind of help, and, obviously this is a small step forward, but it's definitely going to be interesting to see, like, how much of an effect this is going to have on Alexandria going forward. We do see them kind of picking the group up, and it's like, oh, we need a ride to the kingdom. Sadly, we do see that some of the scouters from the Whisperers managed to find the kingdom, and it's like, oh, let Alpha know. So things are not looking good in that regard. So, like I said, this might be the situation where it's like they've been apart for so long, but we might be able to reunite everyone once again under this one common goal. To be fair, they're going to the kingdom. Obviously, Tara and the Hilltop people, including Connie's sister, is there too. So that's good in that regard. So like I said, I'm curious to see in the end. Like, it might be a situation where Daryl and them don't have to go off on their own. I did like Aaron being like, I told you once upon a time, all those years ago, you know, when it was us building North Bridge, that you'd be good at being a parent. And it's like, yeah, here he is, stuck looking after a bunch of, you know, kids, you know, so it's almost him playing the parent role. It's actually interesting too, because this all ties into like because obviously back then they were still looking for Rick. And that's when Michonne had found his gun, you know, and Daryl was like, yeah, I'm not going to give up looking. He's like, because they're like, we haven't seen you in a while. He's like, no, I'll come back, you know, when I find something. She's like, there's plenty of reasons to come back. Finding something doesn't have to be one of them. But for him, it's like he didn't want to ever give up. And I think that was the main reason why he never came back, because it was just like with everything that went down, and he probably felt like he was failing Michonne and everyone by not finding Rick, you know. And it's like never finding anything conclusive of whether he died, whether he got turned, whether they never found anything. Obviously, we know there's more to that. But I am curious, because I know that's being made into a movie and everything, but I still don't know. I would assume that would tie back into the Walking Dead TV show in some shape or form. I mean, I don't know. I guess that depends on how they play out Rick's story. You would think at some point in time he potentially would circle back around. I feel like if they did, that depends on if they don't just kill him off in the movies. Or, you know, I'm curious to see, because obviously that's 6 years worth. Because I think there's at least 2 movies that's supposed to be made. I don't remember. Plus, I remember seeing other things about, even like besides Fear the Walking Dead, that there's other things within the Walking Dead universe they're going to build out potentially. It just like, I think it was like some headlines, so I didn't read too deeply into it. So to be fair, if you don't know, like, this is the only one I watch. I've seen bits and pieces of Fear the Walking Dead, some stuff that would spoil things, because like there's some like current deaths in the show and I'm like, oh wow, I know that character's been around for a while. I know that's kind of a spoiler, but it's just kind of interesting in that regard. But nevertheless, I'm on a huge tangent, so I do apologize. But getting back to what I was talking about earlier, obviously, like, I feel like this is probably the most we'll ever really get of what went down in those 6 years. Like I said, maybe in the future we might go beyond that, but I feel like I said, this was like the heart of everything. This was kind of the start that led to all the dominoes falling. So everything else is just more of like you weren't there to help us when shit hit the fan. So I think this was just like the main thing that they wanted to show. So beyond that, it probably get a little tricky with the whole like 6-year thing, just because it's like, well, Lauren Cohen's not currently on the show, so I think anything related to Maggie would probably be hard to deal with too, and you know, it's a whole thing, you know. So, but even beside all that, you know, like I said, I'm curious to see how this will all play out, because it will, you know, ultimately end up bringing these groups together after 6 years, because obviously we're already seeing that progress happen now, but now with a new enemy. But obviously they don't want that, you know, because it's like, they didn't want war, you know, because they don't want war to be the only thing that ends up bringing them together. They want more from all of this. But obviously, like, it becomes, you know, a battle of ideology, because it's like, for them, it's like, this is the dead's world, you know, the Whispers is like, this is the dead's world, and this is how we assimilate to it. Your need to try and live within it, try to build up some normal society will fall. All places fall, you know. So also, let's not forget Beta is still alive too, so that's another thing. Things are definitely closing in. We do only have 2 episodes left this season, so I'm very interested to see where all this is going to take us going forward. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.